What's up, everybody? Brett here. We're back today with some more Total War Warhammer 2 quick battles. Today I'm going to be playing against Brain Move Hacker with the dwarves. I'm going to be playing as the Beastmen. I've got Morgar here, and we are going to be having a pretty high-level game on our hands. Let me go ahead and slow it down. Even though this game takes a hot minute to get really underway, there's a lot of posturing that goes on. A lot of posturing. I fancy myself a bit of a dwarf player, guys. I think dwarves are probably my best race to play as. And that stems mostly from the fact that I love playing them in campaign, and I think I just fully understand how you have to play them to win almost any given matchup, just because I have so many hours as the dwarves. So I saw this army composition. What's the first thing that I notice? They have no artillery, right? No artillery oftentimes spells doom for the dwarves. That means the dwarves either have to wait for you to come to them, or they have to come to you. They're slow. They're very slow, with the exception of Slayers, who have a speed of 40, which is, you know, respectable for these power Mohawk guys. On everyone else, you're looking 28. That looks pretty standard, yeah. Pretty standard across the board. They've got a very strong defensive line here. Full front line of miners with blasting charges. They've got the Ekron miners there. Those guys are pretty awesome. They've got extra ammunition is kind of their whole deal. They're a regiment of renown. Mixed in a secondary line, you've got dwarf warriors with great weapons. No doubt there to try and tangle with any type of Bestigor play. Cheap armor piercing is the name of the game for them. And then off to the side here, we've got one unit of the Grumbling Guard, which I didn't see until a little bit later. They stayed hidden in the trees pretty smartly. The most expensive unit on the battlefield for the dwarves. One of my favorite units on the dwarven roster as well. They have an aura that gives, it's called the Old Grumblers. It gives vigor in an AoE. It used to be unbelievably powerful, but they've nerfed it into the ground. But still, they're one of those units that are basically Slayers, armored Slayers. They fight until the last man, or the last dwarf. And then aside from that, guys, the real killing power of this build is the 4 units of Slayers here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's kind of encapsulating the back lines. And then we also have 2 groups of Thunderers, and I think only 1 Quarreler. Yes, only 1 Quarreler that I can see. So they've got the ranged advantage. If I were to have built some sort of, I don't know, some sort of Raider heavy build, I can imagine such a thing might be somewhat useful. But I think what they're really anticipating is a dive down the middle. Minotaur, they're probably definitely anticipating my my Razorgore herds. They're not anticipating, however, the 1 Cygor. So my build, right? I had a lot of options here, a lot of options, and some of which I don't like to do because I feel like they are quite easy, just a little too easy, right? You'll notice I have no caster. Now, that's not something I usually recommend to any player, especially a newer player. Pretty much always bring Winds of Magic, especially if you're trying to win. But here I've got Morgar, the Shadow Gave, with his summons and his regen. I'm going to summon some Chaos Spawn, going to be pretty crucial to me having a victory, if that's going to be the case. He is a powerful lord. He's very hard to snipe out, be it with artillery and be it with another lord. That's why I chose him. He's tanky. His summons are great. They're armor piercing. They're unbreakable. They fight really well versus dwarves. They're infantry blenders, and that's all dwarves have to bring. I've got a Gorbuhill to act as his kind of like his bodyguard. His job is just to stand near Morgar and just be his bodyguard. That's all I need him to do. He's got Blood Greed, extra leadership, immune to psychology, fear and all that, not really a big deal versus the dwarves, however. So front line, very cheap first front line. It's just going to have some Ungor Spearman herds out on the flanks with some Gore herds with shields holding up the center. They've got shields, that's why I brought them. They also have Vanguard deployment, so they're able to deploy much closer to the enemy. I took this hill, which was part of my Vanguard deployment strategy, but I didn't fully expect them to deploy this far back, and I really didn't expect them not to have artillery. So secondary line, perhaps the most important part of this build, is going to be the Bestigor. So I think I have 1, 2, 3 Bestigor herds. These guys cost 1,000 gold apiece. They are not cheap, but they are the armor piercers. They have Primal Fury as well. They're the heavy hitters, and their job is going to be to chew through as much of this dwarven infantry as possible. And from what I'm seeing on the other side of the battlefield, these guys are the apex predators. There's nothing on the other side of the battlefield that can do anything to these Bestigor herds in a 1v1. Grumbling Guard probably come close, but perhaps not even them. I think if it was a leadership test, they would probably last and probably beat them, but otherwise, no. And then following that up, as soon as I get that charge off, I'm going to get these Razor Gore herds right up the pipe and start them in the process of tearing up the Dwarven infantry. So they're great versus infantry. They have their armor piercing. Their stats are pretty ridiculous for how cheap they are. They're only 550 gold, so they're about the same cost as these Dwarf Warriors with great weapons. But what you'll see here is that I also have a group of Chaos Warhounds with poison and standard Chaos Warhounds in case there was any type of flanking ability to be done here, to try and shut down artillery perhaps, something like that. But what I'm going to use them as is to help me posture. I'm going to poke and prod my opponent because what he's doing is very smart. And this is where I realized I need to change up my game plan. I'm not fighting a scrub player here, and also Ungrim Iron Fist standing in the center proud amongst his people. I'm not fighting a regular player. This is a very skilled player. His build has weaknesses, but what he's done is really lean into the strength of the dwarves. His front line of miners is going to throw out blasting charges on the charge, hoping to destroy or break up whatever Bestigor charges I have. And he's doing an amazing job. The Cygor has one of the the slowest animations of any, quote-unquote artillery piece. So what he's doing is he's able to see where I'm throwing the rock, and then he's moving in, pretty great fashion to avoid these rocks. And because of that, my Cygor is only up to 6 kills right now. And what I'm being forced to do, and we can go ahead and speed it up because this goes on for a hot minute. I'm being forced to almost every single throw to switch up my target. And what happens is whenever I switch up a target, you can see my Cygor repositions. He turns and faces the other direction. And at the last second, my opponent doing a great job of dodging my shots. So I'm switching it up. Sometimes I'll leave it on for 1 or 2 or 3 shots in a row. He's changing up his front line. I'm not sure exactly how much of my front line he can see. He can't see these Ungor spearmen. They have stalk and they're a little bit further back. Perhaps he can guess they're there if he goes up here and looks at my troop count. Maybe he can see, hey, there's not as much on the battlefield as perhaps there seems to be. I managed to land a shot there on the Dwarf Warriors with great weapons. I don't notice the Grumbling Guard at the beginning of the battle, so it takes me a hot second to realize that they're here. But I would definitely have been targeting them earlier on. They're the most expensive thing on the Dwarven side. So I'm not just going to sit here and be a big weenie and just throw my rocks. I'm going to throw until my rocks are gone, because don't get me wrong, it's the dwarf's job at this point to either weather the storm or to come to me. I'm at the top of a hill. I'm more than happy for him to come to me. I'm also more than happy for him to sit here and continue to use his micro, strain his patience perhaps, trying to dodge these rocks. But I'm not the type of player that's just going to sit here and, go to fast forward and try and get this over with. I'm going to try and make other moves. And this is another test. It's like, how good is my opponent really, right? What does he counter with? How does he feint? How does he deal with me coming in with Chaos Warhounds? And what does he do? I saw him sneaking these Slayers into the trees. So, a lot of people might not think of this, but Chaos Warhounds and Chaos Warhounds with poison, actually great counters versus Slayers. Both of these put together cost as much as a single unit of Slayers. And in a fight, there we go, nice little feint there. He reacts, right? I'm testing him. Both of them together beat a group of Slayers. That's great value. So I'm also bringing around these Razor Gore herds. What I would like to do and what I'm hoping to do at this point, and you see I've landed, I think, a good shot on these Quarrelers. We're up to 23 kills now, is to try and sneak around with these Razor Gore herds. And not necessarily sneak, because I've recognized at this point that my opponent's micro is on point. His situational awareness is great. His battlefield awareness and control is great. He doesn't know exactly what to move, so he moves both of them. Like, how awesome is that? Great player. But what I'm trying to do is, while he's microing, I'm trying to time it, right? The rock comes in, and as the rock is coming in, that's when I'm going to strike. Whenever I think his micro is gone, I'm going to attempt to get in there. And what I want to do the most is to isolate one of these Slayers, take him out, and then come back around here with these Razor Gore herds, and perhaps shut down the Thunderers and then initiate a charge, right? I'm willing to move forward a little bit. I've already kind of scooted forward. I've changed my position from the beginning of the battle. I'm trying to get these Ekron miners here. And I managed to get this 2v1. But what I've also realized is that my opponent very smartly turns his Thunderers. Now, my Razor Gores, they're inside of the forest. They're getting messed up. Their pathing is getting messed up. But there's also negatives for large units inside of forests. And there are positives too. One of the positives is that the Thunderers are having a lot of their shots blocked. So at this point I realize, hey, I've done a ton of damage to these Slayers. I've killed 15 models. I've lost maybe 150 gold. They've lost about 400 gold. Like, that's a fair trade. Let's get these guys out of this fight before they break and run straight off the back of the battlefield. And I haven't really lost anything on my Razor Gores, you know? Let's pull them back and keep them from taking that overwhelming Thunderer fire. Now, I've run into here. I couldn't see these Thunderers, so I was like, oh, damn, no. I just ran out of, you know, one bad situation into another. But what I can do is I can either double down or I can pull these Slayers off me. You see their poison. Their speed has dropped down to 30. Use the Poison Warhounds. Stop these Slayers from chasing. Get these guys further away. But, you know, good play from my opponent. The Thunderers are going to kind of mess them up. And I go up and around, and we're going to charge into the back of these miners. Now, he hasn't reacted to this. So I've kind of managed to get away with this. However, in their beat-up state, they're not going to be the best at dealing with the miners. And without the help of the poison to kind of drag down the stats of the miners, they're also not going to be, you know, it's just not going to be as good of a trade. And with the Thunderers shooting my hounds in the back, that's no bueno. And we need to expect our guys to rout. And while he's dealing with the micro there, I was hoping to get a square shot on the Grumbling Guard, but we barely missed. We did a little bit of splash damage. We're going to continue to take out these miners. I've got 6 shots left, 5 now, on my Cygor. And my guys will rally. My Warhounds will rally. I'll pull them up, and I'll pull them back around, and I'll reunite them with the rest of my force. Because I recognize the timer's counting down, right? I've almost got all my Cygor ammunition gone. And when that happens, I need to be ready to move in. Now, I could leave these Razor Gore herds here. I see my opponent's moving up with the Thunderers. He's kind of posturing with the Slayers. And as soon as that first volley goes off, I think I'm going to move them in just a second here. I don't know if he gets more than 2 volleys off on me. But I see that he's posturing. I'm trying to micro. I'm bringing these guys back in just a second here. Let's see. There we go. Okay. I recognize that I was right outside of his Thunderer's range. You can kind of hover over it and you can see it. I can't see it, unfortunately, in the replay. But his range, about right here. And as soon as the Thunderers repositioned and got in a much better range, I decided to pull out. Chaos Warhounds with poison. I'm bringing these guys back under my control. Good square hit on the Dwarf Warriors. At this point, I'll kind of take whatever I can get. You know, I'm running out of shots. I need to get more value on this Cygor than I've currently gotten. And, you know, don't get me wrong. If I can tie down the Thunderers and the Quarrelers, the Cygor is going to be hell for the Dwarves to deal with if I keep them away from Slayers and out of range of, like I said, the ranged tools that they have. So the Dwarf player is like, hey, he has no more range. No more range. I can move forward now and force the engagement with my range. So it's a battle of range. I've got the 400 range. I lose it. Now I have no range. He's got the, what are Dwarves, 160? Or is it shorter than that? No, they're 145. Wow, and the Thunderers. Is Quarrelers 160? Yes. He's got the 160 range. So he says, hey, I'm going to move into 160 range. Very, very good and astute play here. So that's what he's going to do. He's going to scoot forward. And I'm going to take a second. You know, I'm not the world's fastest microer. But I cover for that by being well prepared. By planning out my positioning. I understand that I have a moment here to organize my troops. To choose engagements, right? Who goes where. And to kind of consolidate my frontal charge. I know I've got to go up the pipe. What is the worst thing I could do? The worst thing I could do would be to send my infantry units, especially my lightly armored infantry units, like my Ungors here, and send them right up the pipe and have them get destroyed by the miners with blasting charges. That's all they want to do. So I'm going to charge, but I'm going to send in my Razor Gore herds first. They're going to eat these blasting charges, no problem, take no damage. And even if they do take damage, fine. They'll rampage. Now, they're rampaging a bit in the Slayers here, which is not ideal, but they're going to be supported very soon with some Ungor Spearmen. My Cygor, I decided not to bring him in the center at first because I wanted to keep him away, and this is kind of a higher tier concept, I guess, from any type of overlapping fire. If I was the Dwarf player, I'd be looking to snipe this. So if I bring him in the center, he's now vulnerable to every different avenue of fire that the Dwarves have available. But when I saw how preoccupied he was with taking out other forces, I realized I could take advantage of that, and that my Cygor would not be in any trouble whatsoever. Now, Gorebull, slow it down a little bit. Gorebull and Morgar coming up the center. And they are going to be trying to beat down Ungrim Iron Fist, who's got Foe Seeker and Red Ruin popped. It's going to be a pretty nasty duel here, but with the poison from Morgar, the armor piercing from the Gorebull, and just straight up Bestigors and these Razorgore herds just punching through these Dwarf Warriors, he's going to be alone. And even though he's unbreakable, he doesn't necessarily want to be alone. Now, I've been looking for gaps. I tried to make gaps in the front line, and in those gaps is where I'm going to send these Gore herds with shields. Now, they take a nasty bit of miner. And these are the Ekron miners. Taking that volley in the back, and that's going to hurt them. But they're fine. The Bestigor herds, shutting down the Ekron miners, they're going to carve through them. The Summon of Chaos Spawn is going to go and try and shut down these Thunderers. And just everything else just needs to be tying stuff down. The Cygor is going to get into melee and stomp the yard. Without Slayers here, looks like there are a few mixed in and amongst. But Slayers do not want to fight Bestigor herds. I'll take this fight all day long. And another group of Chaos Spawn are summoned off of Morgar's ability. So whenever a unit dies or goes to super low health around Morgar, he'll turn them into Chaos Spawn. And that's what's happened. And the Chaos Spawn are going to absorb probably more damage than they dish out, which is fine with me. We're using a lot of our rallying units to try and tie down these Thunderers, because they are the biggest threat on the battlefield right now. Some routing Dwarf units. I've got my Chaos Warhounds chasing down different elements of the routing Dwarf army. But Ungrim has died. Ungrim has fallen. We surrounded him. We beat him down. Thus falls the Slayer King. And then from here, we're going to try and pick our engagements smartly, because we don't want to blob up. Not necessarily. They've got the range advantage. We need to use some of our mobile tools, and unfortunately I get Rampage there. But Rampage into an appropriate target. Dwarf Warriors, that's fine. We need to shut down these Thunderers. That's my biggest concern right now. Bringing all of my rallying forces back to bear. These Razorgore herds and the Ungor Spearman herds are shutting down these Thunderers on this flank. I've got my Chaos Warhounds with poison. Not the best versus Thunderers. Thunderers have 80 armor after all. But with the rampaging of the Razorgore herds, that's going to be all I need to shut these Thunderers down. And the Bestigor herds really aren't needed here anymore. I can try and relocate them, use them in a different fight. For instance, versus these Slayers. 1v1 versus Slayers, they're similarly costed units, but one is made to fight unarmored monstrous units, and the other one is meant to destroy all manner of infantry. And a great blast there from those miners. But at this point, I've got a pretty solid core, right? I've got Morgar with his regen, going to be very difficult to take down no matter what. I've got a Gorebull, who's just carving through the Grumbling Guard right now, who are, to their credit, holding quite well versus overwhelming odds. And then my Cygor is just stomping on people. You gotta love it. He smashes them with the big rock. Let's go ahead and K-mode this. You guys can actually see the beautiful face of the Cygor. The Slayers, the Dwarf Warriors, they're all stacking in here. But I don't have to take bad engagements. At this point, we're sort of numerically even, but everything sort of starts to break, except for the Slayers. And at this point, my opponent is going to bow out. Great game, guys. Really great game. Was this battle lost in the army selection? That would be my first question as the dwarf player. Did I lose this as soon as I didn't take an artillery piece? And I don't think so. I think honestly, if I was the dwarven opponent, I would have moved forward. I would have slowly edged forward, trying to get my Thunderers and Quarrelers within range of really anything, and then trying to get value at that point. Obviously, Brain Move Hacker here was a good enough player to micro out of the way of the Cygor. I feel like he could have just grabbed his whole army and alt-move forward, and while, kind of auto-moving, you move a little bit at a time, right? You move them here, then here, then here, and as you scoot forward, you can micro one or two guys away. So that's probably what I would have tried to do. It might have been very difficult. But forcing the engagement sooner rather than later was probably a smart move. But him being confident in his skills, knowing he could dodge the majority of the Cygor throws, also kudos to him. But this is a very easy dwarf killing army. I don't know how much I touched on the whole, not bringing a caster thing. I know I talked about it for a second. But some of the strategies that you can employ that are good versus the dwarves, and I mentioned that I don't like to do them, you can spam out Manticore summons, you can spam out Cygor summons. I could have had 3 Cygors on the battlefield at once, tossing rocks, overwhelming him. I feel like that's super easy. Manticore summons is something I never like to do. I just don't think it's a fun way to play. There's so many spells in the game that to get kind of affixed to one is a little strange. And then there's some other decent shadow magic. Has like the Penumbral Pendulum. So that's a hard thing for me to say. Bit of a tongue twister. But that's got good armor piercing. Even though the dwarves do naturally have magic resistance, I would say that they are probably the only race that it is, I would say, sometimes a good idea to not bring magic against them. So, and that's kind of what I went with. I figured a Gorebull over a caster on a chariot was kind of my thought process. And I'm glad I did, because there was a moment there where Ungrim came in and he did a lot of damage to Morgar, but by the end of it he had regened it up, and the Gorebull was probably the responsible for the most of the damage done to Ungrim. But that's going to be it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Feel free to send me any type of replays that you have. I have a Discord. The link will be in the description of the video down below. You can join. Happy to have people from the Total War community in the Discord. Lots of people like to get together and play. Sadly, I don't have a lot of time these days to organize big games and stuff, but I do love to see other replays. I'm happy to watch you guys' replays, and if you'd like for me to cast one, just send it in. Just try and make sure it's somewhat new. That way it's on a recent patch. But yeah. Alright, guys. Without any further ado, I'm Brett. My channel is Goodtalk Gaming. And as always, y'all, I will see you in the next one. Take care, guys.